and welcome to today's podcast. We have a really fascinating guest today. Friday is usually Bethany Day, but I'm on the board of the Zepf Center. Some of the board meetings and the accounting bean counting. Oh boy, it is. It's very hard for me to understand. But we have these programming meetings where I can come back and share some great info with you. And then earlier this week, I was actually in the studio here, and I was virtual for this, and I heard Steve Kapela talking about gambling. This hit really hard for me because sports betting is coming to Ohio. And you'll hear me be completely transparent and forthcoming with why this really resonated with me as we begin our conversation. Before we get to Steve, a couple of quick things. You know, I talk about my dad all the time. I've told you how devastated and broken I will be when he is no longer here. Love my dogs. I talk about my brother occasionally. In fact, I'm breaking my dad's rule from a couple of summers ago to not talk about other family on the air. But I can't not talk about this. I got up this morning to go drive to the gym or go get coffee as I usually do. My left back tire, has been a little weird. Every time it's gotten cold, I got to fill it up with air. Did it earlier this week. Today, I get in the car. It's at 30 PSI. I get out of my neighborhood. I'm out front of St. John's. It drops to 20 PSI. I was wondering if it was going flat as I was driving. So roads are empty. I made a safe turn into the gas station there across from St. John's, go back around, go home, reach out to my brother. This is clearly something very problematic. I didn't think the sensor was wrong. I'll make this a long story, a little longer than shorter. I was about to spend $1,000 at AAA because they wanted to replace all of my tires because of it being an all-wheel drive car and the tires have to be something. Paul, my brother, what do you know me for? Mental health, my nerdy Transformer stuff. As I know those things, Paul, magnify that stuff by 50, knows cars. He has loved cars since he was a tiny little boy. He works in car stuff now. I won't get into that stuff. Not like repairs or anything, but everything outside of repairs, he knows. Like, he doesn't work on cars in that regard. Everything else he is a savant with. So I went from $1,000 for 4 tires, 3 of which I didn't need. He said, just get 1 tire, which they were going to charge me $350 for. Paul says, that's a little high. So after some things, we called around, and I was going to wait till the 26th for them to order me a tire. And I'd have to hope my tire held out. I'd have to fill it up with air all the time or put the spare on. Paul found online the exact tire I need for $218 with some shipping and tax, and it'll be here Monday, where I will take it over to AAA, and they will put it on for another $20. Over the course of our family's lifetime, Paul has saved us thousands of dollars. I said to my dad today, I was like, with all that Paul has saved us, we can all drive Ferraris. If by some chance I ever encounter you and it's a car advice situation, know that it's coming from my brother, and he will save you money. Don't be stubborn. He will talk to you. He'll get me info to give to you. I've always told him that he could be like a car concierge, where he will buy cars for people to get them the best deals. And he said there's already people like that, but he could do things like he did with me today, where he saved me at least $750. Hit me up for Paul anytime. Next, Gabrielle, the former rowing coach at Notre Dame. Apparently, some parents had reached out, and her sexuality, I believe, was not a secret. She was gay, is gay. It was not a secret, but it wasn't talked about. And I guess a parent reached out, and the story's in the Blade, and I shared it on my socials today. And eventually, there was some murmuring. Clearly, the temperature had gone up a little bit. And she magnanimously resigned instead of whatever was going to happen to her. She read the writing on the wall. And this is why I struggle and have so many problems with so much of many religions outside of my own, which I will candidly say is probably not perfect. That's not even regarding like Jewish versus Palestinian stuff in Israel. I'm sure there's parts of my religion that I don't know about that are absolutely abhorrent. But for the most part, I think we're pretty damn welcoming in Judaism. I certainly know that we are not against gay marriage. And it bothers me that in other religions where there is such disdain for that, and you will wind up in every depth of hell for doing such a thing, I get it. Those religions and those teachings are trying to create better humans in their view. In this case, the zenith of humanity is Gabrielle for her magnanimous gesture to step away. And I will fully support her. And if I can help find this woman a job or create any kind of happiness for her, she is what places of deep religion with some pretty exclusionary beliefs they're trying to achieve. She's really got it. Steve Kapela, who has a lot of letters after his name and has a fascinating mountain of insight about gambling, which is closer to touch than you would ever imagine. And you'll get that from Steve now. Steve Kapela. I got that right?
Yes, sir.
And it is an alphabet soup of letters beyond your name.
Yes, I have become addicted to success and achievement, and I actually have 29 letters beyond my name, but fundamentally, I am a licensed independent social worker with my supervision designations and a licensed independent chemical dependency counselor. I was the 19th person in the state of Ohio to earn my gambling credentials, and I am an internationally certified gambling counselor.
I came across Steve the other day because I guess I'm technically your boss. I'm on the board of Zepf.
That's why I call you sir.
I loved your presentation the other day, and that's what we're going to talk about. You're here to talk about gambling. We might go a little beyond that afterwards. And let me be completely transparent. My role at Q105 for Cumulus, I have been part of a DraftKings campaign they've been running to promote legalized sports gambling that's coming here to Ohio. Now that I've gotten that part out of the way, I loved your presentation the other day, and it made me think back to my health class when I was a kid, where in the 90s, I just assumed if I had sex with somebody as a teen, the person was going to get pregnant or I was going to get AIDS because I was so frightened.
Right.
But then they're like, you can do this safely. And then as I got a little bit older, there's responsible drinking. And as we enter gambling here legally in Ohio, there's a responsible way to go about it. And that's where I want to hand things off to you, how we can go about the responsible part. And then we'll move on and maybe look for signs of gambling addiction. So encyclopedize me, I guess.
Well, first let me say that in no way am I or Zepf Center or even the treatment community in the state of Ohio anti-gambling. But we are, in fact, very much responsible gambling, pro-responsible gambling. And the interesting thing about gambling in the state of Ohio is that most people don't think about this, but it's starting with children now, and it moves up through every generation, through every classification of people across the citizenry. It is no respecter of color or creed or gender or anything. This affects everyone. And in 2012, before the casinos came to Ohio, the state did a prevalence study, and they said that of all the people who gambled, 5% might meet the criteria for gambling disorder. Well, that's still a substantial number of people, but they built the casinos, and in 2017 they did the same study, even bigger, and that statistic has changed. And that statistic became 11% of people who gambled might do so problematically. They are in the process of redoing that in an even bigger study right now, and estimates are that I'm hearing is they're expecting that prevalence rates may be up to almost 18%.
And I'm sure COVID fueled some of that and the financial problems everyone struggled with for 2.5 years.
Well, and grab hold of the supercomputer in your pocket.
Yeah.
And go to any public space and see how many people are talking and how many people are fiddling with their phones. But here's the scary part. We give 10-year-olds supercomputers with international access to gambling venues around the world. And then mom and dad, because they pay their allowance through their iPhone bill or their credit card bill on their phones, allow kids to buy things, and what they don't understand is that many times they're gambling inside these video games in loot boxes and skins and things called microtransactions.
Can we talk a little bit about that? I'm sure if anybody's listening right now, they have a general idea of that because they're a parent and they know that the debit card keeps getting dinged with that. Can you talk about some signs, and there could be legitimate signs in a 10 or a 12-year-old of the beginning of a gambling addiction and how to responsibly do that?
I think the signs of gambling addiction in young people is very similar to the signs of gambling addiction in older people. And it's I disengage from my daily activities. I become completely irresponsible with money. I'm withdrawing. I'm not doing my homework. I'm not going to work. I'm emotionally unstable. I'm extremely distracted. It gets a little more complicated as you get older.
Sure.
But I have had parents refer young people to me because they had spent $600 or $700 a month on transactions that were between 75 and 99 cents a piece.
Yeah.
And the problem with microtransactions and skins, and let me explain what they are because I know you know. But
Yep, please.
A skin would be, let's say that you have a character.
We'll say Batman.
Batman, but regular Batman has a black cape. Well, that's not sexy enough. Okay, so I want Batman with a Technicolor cape and a red mask. Well, a skin would be an actual filter that you would put on your character. That you would buy this filter, and it would give you the Technicolor cape and the red mask that you want for your. But these things can be hugely expensive. A loot box, on the other hand, is this magical compartment that will usually appear inside of a video game. And there's multiple kinds and styles, but it's almost like a lottery ticket, where for a small fee, usually $1.99, sometimes less, you can open up that box, and that box may have that Batman cape you've always wanted. Now, the interesting thing is, for parents whose kids are engaged in these games, back in our day, I'm 61, so I'm a fossil, but when my parents gave me money to buy video games, they thought I was buying new games.
Right.
What's happening with these kids is they are buying all these opportunities to get all these things to enhance their characters. And a couple of years ago, me and my sons presented at the state gambling conference in Columbus, and they brought their gaming computers, and we did a presentation on loot boxes and skins, and people were flabbergasted to see that some of these things cost, $15,000. You can buy a digital sword that doesn't even exist in reality for $15,000, and these things are greatly sought after. Kids want them so bad they can taste it, but they can't afford $15,000, so they're buying multiple chances of winning it. And it's very much like an adult who buys $200 worth of lottery tickets every week, or however many they can afford. And as one of the largest gambling programs in Ohio, I've worked with many clients who take their paycheck immediately to the gas station and transform it into a stack of lottery tickets.
Can we briefly talk about lottery tickets? And I don't want to spend too much time on this, so I'll ask the question as quickly as I can, and then we'll jump on to some other things. Lottery was a big deal because of Powerball stuff. I hope more and more people know that some lotteries, and maybe all these lotteries can be predatory, especially on certain communities, correct?
I really agree with that. And one of my big concerns has always been the lotteries. An Ohio lottery tries to be responsible, but the imagery around Christmas and Santa Claus and sleighs and lottery tickets, gifting lottery tickets during the holidays or any time of the year is just a horrible idea. And parents who would never think of buying their kids marijuana will often buy their kids gambling instruments. And imagine that dynamic. You've got an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 12-year-old, and we all get $5 worth of tickets, and the 8-year-old wins $1,000. Well, how is that going to affect the family dynamic? And then to the 8-year-old, now he has discovered this magical way to gain notoriety and fame and power, and $1,000 to him is Elon Musk money. He's going to start his own space program.
I was thinking, obviously that's a perfect example, but I was thinking more predatory in the sense, communities of color and low income.
You know what? I think there it comes to the old real estate adage, location, location, location. Because, and it's funny because I like to think of them as the addiction centers.
Yeah.
There are little addiction centers all over town. Some sell gas and some don't, where you can go in there and buy tobacco products, drug I can't say it.
Drug paraphernalia?
That is the word, my friend. Drug paraphernalia, lottery instruments, virtually every vice known to man can be acquired in these single locations, and they generate so much money. And I think even at some point, the most well-intentioned government bureaucrats and bureaucracies fall victim to that desire to make as much money as they possibly can.
Everything is a business. Nobody got into business to lose money.
That's exactly right.
We'll jump ahead a little bit, and we'll go from kids, and maybe we'll have time to come back to that later on. For adults, people are familiar with that. They've seen the commercials forever. You think of casinos, you think of some sports betting, but this is online stuff that's coming here. What is a way for an adult to responsibly gamble? And I heard you say the other day, during the wonderful informative call, you said, we're going to go out to dinner at the casino, then we'll gamble for 30 minutes. And I instantly thought, well, you lose a lot of money in 30 minutes. And what I had always heard, and I'm not a gambler. I'll do some games here and there with my friends, but I have my other vices. I have thousands of Transformers. It's my collection. I mean, we all gamble in some way. Sorry, to get back to the point. Isn't it better to have an amount in your head? And I think the phrase I learned was, you know what you're willing to lose and don't go anywhere beyond that.
I think there's a couple of sides to the argument, and it depends on the motivation of the people. Many people would do exactly that. They would limit the amount of money. Other people are very low intensity gamblers. They play slowly.
That's my dad at the penny slots.
Right.
He just wants time to pass.
Right. And he's going to go 3 hours, and if he's like my aunt, who, God bless her soul, would spend 5 hours in the casino and lose $30.
Yeah. My dad's there. He does the penny slots, one, because he's cheap, but two, it lets him sit there longer to look at women a third of his age. He likes that. Right. So that makes sense from the time perspective of it. So whether it's what it really comes down to whatever is most effective for the individual or family, because many couples go, and even adult children, and it can be that function, but whether you limit the amount of time or the amount of money, or but you're exactly right. You can only gamble within your means, and you should never borrow money to gamble. You should not put gambling on credit cards. I think I wrote the phrase down here, only bet what you can afford to lose, regardless of whether it's sports or the casino. And I always had the reasoning in my head, if everybody says, let's go spend $200 at the casino tonight, I'm like, well, wait a second. That could be going in like 8 minutes. I'd rather go spend $200 at Final Cut where I can enjoy that. But we're all different people. What are some other responsible gambling tips? I think you need to know the risks before you bet. There is gambling with a reason with an amount of reserve, and then there's just reckless, dumb gambling where you walk up to the roulette table and empty out your pocket, or maybe you don't know those games. And is that? I'm sorry to interrupt. Is that another big hint? Don't feel forced to play tables if you don't know what you're getting into. And that's right. And I believe the casinos actually have classes and I'm not recommending you do that, but they can teach you to lose your money. Well, and they'll be more than happy to do it. And, yes. And God bless their souls. They're just trying to run a business. Yeah. And most people who go to the casinos do so responsibly. Yeah. But let me just say this.
I am a recovery guy. I am in recovery, and gambling is very much a part of that story. And no casino ever took anything from me.
Yeah.
I gave it to them every time, without exception. And so, some of the responsible gambling tips I would say is you got to understand that everybody loses over time.
Yeah.
It's a statistical impossibility that you will always win, because they don't build billion-dollar casinos to take thousandaires and make them into millionaires.
And there's no sorcery around a machine. You don't have a feeling that this one's going to hit. Like that's ridiculous, right?
Well, that's magical thinking, and to a certain degree, there's something called ritualization. And I got some great stories. I used to work with this lady, and she would go in the machine, and she would take her little Kleenexes, and she would wipe the whole machine down and get all the fingerprints off, and she would talk to it, and she would never let the machine see all of her money, and she would only put in 120 at a time and play for a few minutes and cash out. And I asked her, she was telling me this, and she'd love the machine and talk to it. And I said, well, how did it end up? She goes, I'd be kicking that thing when I was before I left.
A statistic that I'm familiar with, again, my knowledge is more in sports gambling. This is what and you tell me if I'm wrong here. If you win in sports, if you're betting games and whatnot, I know you can bet pitches now in baseball. It's insane because of our phones, and we can maybe get to that later on. If you win 60% of the time you're gambling in sports, you're basically a savant, right?
That's probably true. I'm not a big sports guy, but I can tell you that knowing more is no guaranteeing of winning, because at the end, the last flip of the card, roll of the dice, the last play is luck. It's going to be what it's going to be, and there is no advanced knowledge of that outcome.
Right. There is information in sports gambling. I have a very good friend whose career has gone supernova. We worked together back in Pennsylvania, moved out to Vegas, was a very responsible gambler, loved football. Now he's on ESPN on one of their gambling shows. Again, super responsible, great guy, great friend. And his intelligence fascinates me, but he's him, and he doesn't know everything. Nobody knows everything. Right. Because if you did, like you said, we would all be millionaires. We all would have bet the Packers to lose last night, whatever the heck the line was. Suicide and mental health issues with this. You said something the other day that really struck me, and I think you said that there was a pretty high percentage of people who take their lives when they are addicted to gambling. And I was trying to process that, and it eventually made a lot of sense. But you tell me if this is the thinking. If I have a drinking problem, me dealing with my depression, I know, as much as my brain tells me I am doomed, I know there is help. I can go get medication. I can go see a therapist. The bad day will pass. If I lose 60 grand, that money ain't coming back.
That's exactly it. And I think there's another piece of it. Gambling is the hidden addiction. If you are drinking, everyone knows you're drinking.
Yeah.
If you are engaging in smoking crack cocaine, and no one else in the world cares what's on the floor like you do. People who are addicted to opiates, they can spend huge sums of money. But a gambler, you're right, could spend $60,000 in an afternoon. His savings, and it's, I've had these people in my office, and their college money, lose it all in an afternoon, stone cold sober.
No counselor, no medication will get that back.
Well, and go home and tell your wife that.
Soon to be ex-wife.
Right. Well, and much more tragically, I deal with a lot of people, and one of the we have drug courts, but because gambling is such a hidden addiction, there's no gambling courts. And I've heard judges say, I've never seen gamblers in my court. Well, I've testified in court many times, and they're in court all the time, in divorce court and bankruptcy court and criminal court. But no person ever walked up to the judge and said, yeah, I'm a problem gambler, because it doesn't do them any good.
Right.
We have a
couple minutes left here with this part of the show. Well, let's go to some help. The number gets read very quickly at the end of commercials. How can people get... We talked about when they should seek help. It's like anything else, when it impacts your life on a daily basis. How can people get help? What's that process like? Like, how do you get the addiction out of someone?
From accessing help, I mean, probably the best way, you can call the Zepf Center. We have the largest gambling treatment program, or the Ohio Problem Gambling Helpline, which is 1-800 589-9966. But gambling treatment is a very non-threatening, almost relieving treatment. We don't spend so much time fighting the addiction, because when you try and fight an addiction, and I'm 14 years sober, so I speak from a certain perspective. When you try and fight an addiction, there's nothing to win but not doing the thing you think you enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're not going to fight the addiction. We're going to fight for responsibility, because in all cases, the opposite of addiction is responsibility. There's no area of your life that being more responsible doesn't make your life better. There's no area of your life that being less responsible makes your life worse. And there are some PhDs who would say that connection is the opposite. But at the level I work, if you're still stealing your mom's wedding rings, you're not going to connect until you become responsible.
Let me ask you this question, and we might not have time to finish it here in this part of the recording. When there's a drug or alcohol addiction, those two things deeply affect your brain chemistry. Gambling does, but perhaps not to that degree, because it's not a chemical going into your body, right?
You would think so, but as a recovered gambler, I can tell you that walking out of a bar, walking out of a casino, and walking out of a drug house was the exact same experience for me.
I get it.
That horrible, I would sell my mother's soul for just one more hour, for one more bet, one more anything. And I think the really interesting thing about, do you know at the Zepf Center, we identify 1 out of 5 people in our entire substance use disorder population, which is probably 1,000 people, 1 out of 5 likely meets the criteria for gambling disorder.
Yeah.
Which is an absolutely amazing statistic. But think about it. You've already got a group of people with a predisposition towards an addiction. And then there's the hierarchy of addiction. Okay, if I got $100, I'm going to drink, drug, and gamble. If I got $50, I'm gonna get high and gamble, because you know what? Gambling is the only addiction that just might make your life better. You just could maybe. And I'll tell you what, but when you're completely broke and you got $3 left and you can't get drugs, and what most people will do is go buy a few lottery tickets to try and win some money to come back up. And so, I always ask people, I said, are you a drug addict with a gambling problem or a gambler with a drug problem? Because I see so many people who can put down the drugs and stay sober for a period of time, but are still buying scratch-off tickets, still going to the casino.
How can people get in touch with you and then the Zepf resources?
You can go to Zepf Center, Zepf Center's website. You can look us up in the phone book, or if you call, actually, we are the only service provider within 20 counties in northwestern Ohio. So if you call the Problem Gambling Helpline, you will be connected to some excellent resources. We'll be one of them, and that number is, again, 1-800-589-9966, and you will rapidly be speaking to me.
Awesome. All right, so that's contact. That's done. We're pressing on. We got another 15 minutes or so. Can we go back to the kid stuff? And if you want to monologue or rant, because I want to sit here in awe about phones and with sports gambling coming and the video games and just how much this gets under your skin and just really how dangerous it can be, and how parents might not understand that this is, as you said, like gambling.
It is in fact gambling. And a lot of times, I think more people in this world have been killed with love than any other substance. And because
I would like to be killed with love.
Well, no, think about this. I love my kids, so I buy my 10-year-old the brand new iPhone. And then I attach my credit card to it because I love him, and he can get his allowance paid through that, because, he goes to the store and he gets gum.
I get it.
But he doesn't do that. He's engaged in, first of all, you don't know, because I've talked to many, many young people who are gambling across, international. Look, when we were kids, I would have swore I was 18 years old and checked the box to play the video game that I wanted to play. And kids have not changed at all, and they're still going to check the box and figure out how they're going to be able to access adult gambling games if that's what they want to do. If they're into poker, if they're into video games. It used to be that if you wanted to gamble, I would have to go to Las Vegas. I'd have to go to Atlantic City. I'd have to go. And then in 2012, and this is no fault of the casinos, they built the casinos, and then you had to drive across town.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, since 2 years ago when they made me get rid of my flip phone.
You know about skins and loot boxes, so that's your in.
Right. So I get a pass.
Yes.
But now, you don't have to go to Las Vegas. You don't have to go to Rossford. You got kids laying in bed at night, or parents playing. And sports betting coming is even going to be even worse. But I'm working with some folks right now, and online bingo.
Yeah.
Is just tearing them up.
I know you talked about some older people before, and even before. My dad would never gamble on his phone. He hates even using speakerphone. But I've heard of some stories. This is why I want to have this conversation. Gambling is invisible and more pervasive than anybody would give it credit for. I'm sure in the past someone would laugh at a 78-year-old who gambled away thousands at bingo. That person might have taken their life, and that was a form of gambling.
Right.
When you pulled up your phone, I thought we were going to go through an exercise, and I thought the exercise was going to be in 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, with nothing on my phone right now, I could probably get an app and place a bet for a game tonight.
You know what? I wouldn't doubt it. And here's the scary part. I have seen commercials where we'll forgive your first $500 in losses.
Yeah.
Well, if we're going to forgive your first $500 in losses, what are we perceiving that you're going to bet?
Yeah.
Because a big discount on a product, is 20%. Are we assuming you're going to spend $10,000?
Are you a sports guy at all? Football fan?
I enjoy watching my wife watch sports.
Okay.
Because there's lots of praying and throwing things, but I am not a fan. No.
This week, I've come across people trying to pray away gun violence, and praying the gay away, and praying for Taylor Swift tickets. It doesn't work. It doesn't work during games. I go back to 6, 7, 8 years ago watching football games on Sunday, and it wasn't the content. It was the overwhelming nature of... Was it FanDuel? The daily fantasy commercials that were playing every break during a football game. And again, it wasn't the product. It was the overwhelming nature of it. But that really was a watershed moment for people realizing that, I don't have to wait till just Sunday. I can bet on a game, and not like fantasy sports stuff, which is also gambling to a degree, but I can bet Tuesday night on a Mets-Yankees game if I want.
Here's the thing. It's not any one form of gambling. Since 1974, when the Ohio Lottery came to Ohio, we have had a 1,000-fold increase in the opportunities to gamble. When I was a little kid, you went to the bookie, you went to the racetrack, or the check pool, and that was it.
Are you telling me you didn't play quarters in the bathroom in school?
Well, I might have done a little bit of that. But that's still going on digitally on somebody's phone, but because I doubt kids carry quarters because they have... Right.
I'll Venmo you. You know Venmo, right?
I know what it is. I don't do it.
Venmo Cash App? Okay. Yeah, it's is there... I'm sure a question people are wondering amid this conversation I am. Does the money for lotteries and the casino, does it go back into healthy places?
I think with all good intentions it does, but what happens is I think sometimes, this is, I'm not saying this, I think this is.
Please.
They said when the lottery came that all the money was going to go towards the schools, and I'm sure it did because they wrote that into the legislation. But then the people, they said, well, now that you've got all this money, we can take the other money out.
Right. Okay.
And so, did it really help? Well, maybe for the first year it did.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm going to tell you what, the state of Ohio did something absolutely brilliant when they let the casinos come back. And in the enabling legislation, they said that 2% of the profit from the casinos would go to pay for gambling treatment and prevention programs, which means that gambling treatment is free for the asking. And although it is not free, it is free to the user. And if anybody is curious about gambling treatment, you can come talk to me. Contact me at the Zepf Center, and you will not be charged for that program. If the state of Ohio ever legalizes marijuana or any kind of drugs, if they had the same wisdom to take 2 to 5% of the profit on those sales and put that towards drug and alcohol and mental health treatment programs, we would change the world.
Yeah.
In the world of gambling treatment and prevention, there's something called the Ohio model, and the Ohio model has proven incredibly successful, and we lead the many other states in gambling treatment and prevention. But the foundational piece was to provide that funding that allowed a group of professionals dedicated to that addiction to come into play. And I think if they ever legalized other substances, if they did the same thing, it would be a watershed moment in treatment, because people struggle to get those treatment, especially residential treatment, paid for.
Can I share 2 personal anecdotes with you?
Sure.
So I grew up in Philadelphia, and you went to Atlantic City to gamble. That was it. And I was very familiar. Like my dad he explained that you go to Atlantic City. We went a lot because we were a Jewish family. Go down and all the shore all the places on the Monopoly board.
Right.
Or you go to Vegas. So I was very familiar with this. In 1999, I moved to Detroit. All these casinos had just popped up.
Right.
And it was wild for me to experience as a kid, just knowing, I thought they were only in Atlantic City. I moved back home to Philadelphia at some point, and there was like an over concentration of casinos in the eastern part of Pennsylvania and central Pennsylvania. And I watched the casinos that were legendary, that had been in movies and whatnot, and Trump all vanished in Atlantic City because all these other casinos had popped up all over the place. My other story was Ben Affleck, who it was funny if you read through his words. This is not a person, I don't know him or anything, but it was funny reading the story. He never had a gambling problem. He had a winning problem, which was like, we should all be so lucky as that. And I don't mean to make light of it, but it's like he won a lot, but no one's going to do that.
I was in, I'll never forget this. I was in Atlantis, and Michael Jordan was there, and it was in his heyday.
Historic gambler.
And yes, and they said, I don't know this for a fact, but there is a beautiful suite that extends between the 2 major hotels on the island there, and that was supposed to be where he was staying. And he was down at the blackjack tables with about 100 security guards around him, and he was right in the middle, and he was playing $5,000 a hand, and he must have lost 30 or 40 hands and just walked away like he lost his lunch money. Do
you believe, I don't know how much of conspiracy is or it's factual, and David Stern died, so we'll never know. Do you think David Stern sat him down for his gambling issues in Atlantic City rather than him wanting to go play baseball?
Who knows?
It's so funny. You say Jordan, and I think of Charles Barkley and his hideous golf swing, and he's just a great personality.
Right.
But I have friends, they don't like to play golf. They just happen to hit some balls while they're drinking.
Right.
Similar,
right.
You bring up Jordan, it's like he just had that personality where certain people like him couldn't do anything unless there was money on the line because they were so competitive.
Well, and this is a little bit left of field of what we're talking about, but I think it's worth noting. A lot of times we judge people's gamblings by our own financial wherewithal, and I was at a meeting one time, and there were some preventionists and all well-intentioned people, and they were like, casinos shouldn't be allowed to take more than $5,000 from any one person.
Stop.
Well, and in my mind, I'm thinking, well, there is a thing called personal responsibility.
Sure.
And I'm thinking, that's fine. And in your world, that is a perfectly sensible number. But what if you own a major corporation?
What if Miguel Cabrera wants to come down here and gamble at Hollywood Casino?
Yeah. What if Michael Jordan wants to come down and play, blackjack at Hollywood? It ain't going to happen. But who am I to say what is an appropriate amount of money? You could have $5 million in the bank, and I've got 50,000, and we're going to look at that money in completely different ways.
Humans have a lot of flaws. It's amazing that we're still alive, even though we're doing our damnedest to rid the planet of ourselves. But we have a way of putting our beliefs and standards on other people very easily. And I think a younger generation, millennials, Gen Z, are doing a better job of being more empathetic. So hopefully we'll stick around for another 250,000 years. But to end our conversation, I wouldn't bet on it.
Right.
Another bad pun. I made a good bet, a good risk to have you have this visit, and it was as thrilling and as informative as I expected. It was great to meet you. I'm sorry with all my time in the Zepf Center that I just came across your path, and I hope we made Deb happy.
Well, and if you ever would like me to come back, just give me 5 minutes notice and I will be here.
I'm going to get into the other recovery stuff, and I'll stop recording here in a second, but I want to get this on tape. What other recovery are you in? Alcoholism?
Yes, I was addicted to morphine when I was 13 years old after a Boy Scout incident. I broke my hips. I've been homeless. Spent a couple years in jail. I was addicted to crack cocaine. I'm an alcoholic. I sobered up in jail at 47. Spent a couple years working on me in 12-step recovery, and got a job as a counselor assistant, and I loved it, and it transformed my life. And I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be the best. And at 50, I went to college and built this career. And I think if I have a strength, it is that when I'm talking to somebody about addiction, I'm not wondering why they did it. I know why they did it. I probably did it for the same reason they did.
It's I get it too. Like I told you, I struggle to experience happiness and joy. Like my depression has really squashed that down. But what I do, most people go to counseling because they feel like they're just in the rat race of life.
Right.
I got to keep the job. I hate the job, but I got to take care of the family. Blah blah blah. They go to counseling like, why am I here? I actually have an immense sense of I want the fun. My purpose bucket is filled because, and you can probably relate to this for what you just said. When I go do my talks to kids, whoever, that purpose is absolute euphoria for me. It's a high to walk out of that room where I'm literally emotionally gassed because I shared myself. And then when somebody comes up to me afterwards or they reach out, like the same high somebody would get from crack, I get that high from somebody emailing saying, you don't know how much you saved my life, or you helped me talk to my husband going through this. I think we have something in common, and that is I don't have to go to work. I get to go to work. Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel the same way.
Steve Kapela, thank you so much. Part 2, we'll get it in the books. Thank you so much.
Hey, I appreciate you. Thanks, brother.